Welcome back to Empowerment in Illness. I am Gwen, your host. This month we're continuing our Lupus Awareness Month series, and today's episode is for the lifers, the ones who have been living with lupus for years, the ones who have learned the names of labs, medications, symptoms, specialists, warning signs, and insurance language they never asked to know. This episode is for the people who are not newly diagnosed anymore, but still not free from the weight of it. The people who have been through the first shock, the first deep dive into research, the first round of explaining, the first wave of people checking in, and the first season of trying to understand what lupus was going to mean for their life. And now, years later, they're still here, still managing, still adjusting, still hoping for stable days, still listening to their bodies, still wondering if a new symptom is something small or something serious, still showing up to appointments, still organizing medications, still explaining flares, still deciding how much truth to tell when someone casually asks, "How are you?" Today, we're talking about what happens when lupus becomes your normal. Not because it becomes easy, not because you stop caring, not because the pain, fatigue, fear, or frustration disappear, but because over time, lupus can become woven into the way you plan, work, rest, love, parent, travel, socialize, and survive. And sometimes when something becomes your normal, other people stop seeing how heavy it still is. They assume you're used to it by now. They assume you know how to handle it. They assume that because you've lived with lupus for years, you don't need the same compassion, patience, or support you needed in the beginning. But familiar doesn't mean easy. Manage doesn't mean painless. Years of experience don't erase the need for support. So today, we're speaking directly to the long-term lupus warriors, the people who are still carrying this, the people who may not get the same check-ins anymore, the people who may look like they have it handled because they've had no choice but to learn how. Let's get into it. There's a strange thing that happens when you live with lupus for a long time. People may stop reacting with concern, not because they don't care at all, but because your illness has become familiar to them too. They've heard about the flares. They've seen you cancel plans. They know you have appointments. They know fatigue is part of the story. So after a while, they may start treating it like old information. But lupus is not old information when it is happening in your body today. The pain you feel today is not less painful because you felt pain last year. The fatigue you wake up with this morning is not lighter because you haven't had fatigue before. The fear that comes with a new symptom doesn't disappear just because you know the routine. Being used to the pattern doesn't mean you are untouched by it. You may know what a flare feels like, but that doesn't mean you welcome it. You may know how to prepare for an appointment, but that doesn't mean you enjoy walking into another waiting room. You may know how to rest, pace, explain, adjust, and recover, but that doesn't mean it takes no emotional energy. Sometimes people mistake your experience for ease. They see how much you know and assume that knowledge protects you from the weight of living it. They hear you describe symptoms with calm words and assume it must not be that serious. They see you manage medications, track appointments, and keep going, and they forget that competence can exist right beside exhaustion. That can feel lonely. It can make you wonder if people only showed up in the beginning because the diagnosis felt new and urgent to them. It can make you feel like the world has moved on while your body is still asking you to fight the same fight, just in new ways. There's also a quiet pressure to become a good patient when you've been sick for years. People expect you to know your limits, but not talk about them too much. They expect you to manage your symptoms, but not let them interrupt plans. They expect you to stay informed, but not sound worried. They expect you to be strong, but not need too much. That is a heavy expectation to carry, because the truth is, you can be experienced and still overwhelmed. You can know your body well and still be surprised by it. You can have years of practice and still have days when lupus knocks the wind out of you emotionally, physically, or spiritually. So if you're listening as someone who has lived with lupus for years, hear this. You're not failing because it still affects you. You're not weak because the same illness still makes demands. You're not dramatic because you still need care around something you've been managing for a long time. And if you love someone who has been living with lupus for years, don't assume they're fine because they've learned how to function. Don't assume they don't need help because they no longer explain every detail. Don't assume that silence means ease. Sometimes silence means they get tired of reminding people that this is still hard. There's a version of you that has survived more than most people know. Not just the obvious things, not just the appointments, the tests, the medication changes, or the flare days. There's a version of you that has survived the moment no one witnessed. The moments when you sat in your car before walking into a doctor's office and tried to gather yourself. The moment when you smiled through pain because explaining it felt too tiring. The moment when you look at your calendar and wonder how your body was supposed to make it through the week. The moment when you got news you didn't know how to process, then still had to go home and function. That version of you deserves recognition. Not the kind that turns your pain into a slogan. Not the kind that tells you everything happens for a reason. Not the kind that makes you feel like your job is to inspire other people. You deserve a deeper kind of recognition. The kind that says, what you have carried has been real, and it has cost you something. Years of lupus can teach you things you never wanted to learn. You may know how to read your body's early warnings. You may know which symptoms you can watch and which ones need to call. You may know how to prepare for a flare, how to organize medication, how to explain brain fog, how to keep records, how to ask better questions, and how to leave space for recovery. That knowledge matters. It was earned. It came through trials, mistakes, setbacks, fear, disappointment, and persistence. It came from living inside a body that kept asking you to pay attention. It came from the times you pushed too hard and learned the cost. It came from the time you rested and still wish you could do more. But let's be honest, being knowledgeable doesn't mean you are never tired of knowing. Sometimes you may wish you didn't have to be so informed. You may wish your body didn't require so much monitoring. You may wish your life didn't include so many calculations. You may wish you could be casual about your health for once. There can be grief in becoming an expert on your own illness. People may admire how well you manage it, but they may not understand that you didn't choose to become skilled at surviving lupus. You learned because you had to. You adapted because life required it. You became resourceful because your body, your care, and your future needed you to pay attention. Still, the version of you that has survived deserves tenderness, not just applause, tenderness. You deserve rest that doesn't have to be earned. You deserve support that doesn't only arrive after a crisis. You deserve to be seen as a whole person, not only as someone who is strong, but because they have endured so much. And maybe part of today's episode is giving yourself permission to honor that version of you. The one who made it through the first year. The one who kept going through the flare that changed things. The one who asked questions. The one who cried and still continued. The one who learned how to live with the diagnosis that kept changing the rules. You have survived so much. And survival shouldn't mean you have to pretend it was easy. In the beginning, people may show up differently. They ask questions. They check in. They send messages. They want updates. They may offer rides, meals, prayers, company, or help with appointments. The diagnosis feels fresh to them, so they understand, at least for a while, that something serious had entered your life. But then time passes. Their lives keep moving. The urgency fades for them. They may still care, but the check-ins become less frequent. The offers become less specific. The concerns get quieter. And eventually, you may realize that lupus is still very present in your life, but it is no longer present in other people's mind in the same way. That can hurt in a way that's hard to explain. You don't want to be treated like a crisis forever. You don't want people hovering over you. You don't want your illness to be the only thing anyone sees. But you also don't want to feel forgotten while still carrying something that never left. This is one of the painful contradictions of long-term illness. You work so hard to manage it, and then your ability to manage it can make people assume you don't need help. You become skilled at pushing through, organizing, adjusting, and recovering, and that skill can hide the fact that you're still tired, still scared sometimes, still stretched, still in need of support. People may think they've had lupus for years. They know what to do. And maybe you do know what to do in many situations. But knowing what to do doesn't mean doing it takes no energy. You may know you need to call the doctor, but still feel worn down by another medical conversation. You may know you need to rest, but still feel guilty because life doesn't pause with you. You may know you need to ask for help, but still feel afraid of becoming too much for people. Support fading can also change how much you share. You may stop giving updates because you don't want to sound repetitive. You may stop saying when you're flaring because people have heard it before. You may stop explaining pain because you can feel when someone's attention has moved on. Over time, you may start carrying more alone, not because you want to, but because you're tired of wondering who still has room to care. And that can lead to quiet isolation. Not always the obvious kind where nobody is around. Sometimes it's the kind where people are around, but they don't really know what's happening inside your life anymore. They see the version of you who has learned how to function, but not the version of you who still has to recover afterwards. For loved ones listening, this is where support needs to mature. Early support often reacts to shock. Long-term support responds to reality. It says, I know this has been a part of your life for years, but I don't want to assume I understand how it feels today. It says, what has changed lately? It says, where do you need help right now? It says, I know you're strong, but I don't want strength to be the reason you're left alone. That kind of support can be simple. A recurring check-in, a flexible plan, a ride offered before someone has to ask, a meal during a flare, help with paperwork, patience when energy changes, a willingness to hear about lupus even when it's not new anymore. Lupus may become part of someone's normal, but support should not disappear because the illness became familiar. People may think fear belongs only to the beginning, the diagnosis stage, the early appointments, the first time someone hears the word lupus and tries to understand what it means. But fear can still show up years later. It may show up when a new symptom appears. It may show up when pain feels different this time. It may show up when labs change, when medication changes, when fatigue deepens, when the body feels unpredictable, or when a flare interrupts life after a stretch of stability. Even if you have lived with lupus for years, fear can still find its way in. And sometimes that fear feels harder to admit because you think you should be past it. You may tell yourself, I've been dealing with this long enough. I shouldn't be scared. But fear is not a sign that you lack experience. Fear is a human response to uncertainty, and lupus can bring uncertainty no matter how many years you've lived with it. The fear can be specific. What if this symptom means something is getting worse? What if this medication stops working? What if I can't keep up with work? What if my family gets tired of this? What if I need more help than I want to ask for? What if I have to change my life again? The fear can also be quiet and unnamed. It may sit under the surface while you go through your day. You may still laugh, work, parent, clean, answer messages, and handle responsibilities. But inside, a part of you may be listening closely to your body, wondering if something is shifting. Long-term lupus warriors often get good at functioning with fear in the room. They know how to keep moving while waiting for results. They know how to sound calm when asking serious questions. They know how to make dinner after a hard appointment. They know how to reassure others while still needing reassurance themselves. But functioning with fear doesn't mean that fear is gone. It doesn't mean the person should have to carry it without support. Sometimes the most caring thing someone can say is, that sounds crazy. I'm here with you. Not, don't worry. Not, you've been through this before. Not, I'm sure it'll be fine. Just, I'm here with you. For the person living with lupus, you are allowed to admit when something scares you. You don't have to present yourself as calm just because you've been sick for years. You don't have to minimize a concern because you think you should know better by now. Your fear deserves room, and your concern deserves to be taken seriously. And there's also something powerful about the fact that you keep going with fear in the room. Not because fear makes you stronger, but because you have learned how to keep caring for yourself, even when you don't have every answer. That's not small. That's a deep kind of courage. When someone has lived with lupus for years, they may not need the kind of support they needed in the beginning, but they still need support. Their needs may be more specific now, more layered, more connected to the life they've built around this illness. Long-term fighters deserve updated care, not assumptions based on how they were doing 2 years ago, not rushed appointments that treat their symptoms like old news, not the idea that if they have managed this long, they must be fine. They deserve providers, families, workplaces, and communities that stay curious about what is true now. They also deserve rest without guilt. Years of lupus can create a strange pressure to keep proving that you're managing well, but rest is not a sign that you've stopped trying. Rest is part of the work. Recovery is part of the work. Saying no is part of the work. Protecting your energy is part of the work. Long-term fighters deserve to need help without feeling embarrassed. You can have years of experience and still need someone to drive you to an appointment. You can know your body and still need help sorting papers. You can be independent and still need support during a flare. Long-term fighters deserve relationships that don't punish them for still being sick. That means people need to understand that chronic illness doesn't follow a neat timeline. There may not be a final chapter where everything goes back to normal. There may be seasons of stability, seasons of change, seasons of grief, and seasons where everything has to be adjusted again. Long-term fighters deserve room to change. Maybe what worked for you 5 years ago doesn't work now. Maybe your energy has shifted. Maybe your body has new limits. Maybe your priorities have changed. Maybe your tolerance for pretending has run out. You are allowed to update your life as your needs change. This is where the paper trail can be especially meaningful. Years of lupus often mean years of records, labs, medications, appointments, referrals, questions, patterns, and decisions. Keeping that information organized can help you advocate with more clarity, especially when you're tired of starting from scratch. But beyond the paperwork, long-term fighters deserve something deeper. They deserve dignity. They deserve to be spoken to like experts in their own experience. They deserve to be believed when they say something has changed. They deserve to be supported when they say something is still hard. If lupus has become part of your normal, that doesn't mean your needs have become less important. It means your life has required a level of adjustments that deserves ongoing care, not just admiration, not just "you're so strong" care. Help, patience, follow through. Set aside some quiet time this week with your journal. These prompts are meant to help you notice your direction, not judge your pace. When you think about how long you've been living with lupus, what emotion comes up first? Pride, exhaustion, sadness, anger, gratitude, grief, or something else? Write it down without trying to make it sound acceptable to anyone else. What part of your lupus journey have people stopped asking about because they assume you haven't handled? Make a list of the places where you still need care, patience, or support, even after years of managing. What has the long-term version of you learned that the newly diagnosed version of you did not know yet? Write to that early version of yourself with honesty. Not a perfect speech, just a few true sentences from the person who has made it this far. For our listeners' action plan, this week we're asking you to take 3 practical steps toward honoring the long-term reality of living with lupus. Step 1. Name what is still hard. Choose one part of lupus that still affects you, even after years of living with it. It may be fatigue, pain, fear, appointments, asking for help, medication change, or the emotional weight of managing it all. Say it clearly to yourself. This is still hard for me. Step 2. Update one form of support. Look at one area where your needs have changed. Maybe you need more rest after appointments than you used to. Maybe you need help with paperwork. Maybe you need more flexible plans. Maybe you need someone to check in without waiting for a crisis. Choose one support need and write down what would actually help now. Step 3. Reach out with one honest sentence. If you're living with lupus, share one honest sentence with someone safe. You might say, I know I've had lupus for years, but I still need support. If you love someone with lupus, reach out and say, I know you've been managing this for a long time, but I don't want to assume it's easy. What would support look like right now? And now, a word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by the Paper Trail, an empowerment and illness tool created to help you organize the details that chronic illness can make so hard to keep track of. When you've been living with lupus for years, the information can pile up. Appointments, labs, medications, referrals, symptom change, questions, insurance notes, and follow-up instructions can start to feel scattered across folders, portals, notebooks, emails, and memory. The Paper Trails gives you a place to gather what matters, so you're not trying to pull everything together when you're already tired. It helps you prepare for appointments, track important changes, and keep your health information easier to access when you need it most. This isn't about creating more work for yourself. It's about giving yourself support before the next appointment, the next flare, or the next question. When lupus has become a part of your life for years, your records tell a story that deserves to be organized and heard. Be prepared. Don't panic. And now, back to the show. Before we leave, I would like to close with a special portion of the show I call Healing Heartbeats. This is where we allow ourselves to wallow in sorrow. Give yourself 3 minutes to laugh, cry, scream, cuss, or just sit in silence. Whatever you need to do to feel it, do it. Let the depression in for only 3 minutes. Once you've reached 3 minutes, compartmentalize it and get back to living. This is a rinse and repeat behavior. You cannot let depression take over, because when it does, it will not let go. When we hear about the passing of someone, they have the day they were born and the day they pass away. There is a dash in the middle. It's not a long line, but a short dash. That dash represents your life. Go live in spite of having a chronic illness. Don't let your condition stop you. When lupus becomes your normal, people may forget that normal doesn't mean easy. It doesn't mean painless. It doesn't mean you stop needing care. It means you've learned how to keep living with something that keeps asking you to adjust. If you are one of the lifers, one of the people who has carried lupus for years, we see you. We see the knowledge you've earned, the appointments you've made it through, the flares you've survived, the fear you've managed, and the life you've kept building even when your body made it difficult. Your endurance deserves more than admiration. It deserves support. It deserves rest. It deserves updated care. It deserves people who remember that lupus didn't leave just because time passed. Remember, you have the strength, the heart, and the support to continue your journey. Be safe.